everybody, welcome to Cheeseology with Adam. I'm Adam. Today we're going to be making a Camembert. It's the second video in the 4-part Bloomy Rind cheese series. We started with a Brie, now we're doing the Camembert. Next we're going to be doing a Blue Brie, and then we're going to wrap it up with a triple creme. So a lot of great cheeses, don't require a lot of aging, absolutely delicious. So let's get started. For ingredients, we're going to need calcium chloride, there on the left. Then I use animal rennet for coagulation of the curd. And then we will need Penicillium Candidum. And then moving to the right, that small packet is C21 Buttermilk Culture. And then in the far right is Geotrichum Candidum. As you can see, if you watched the Brie video, it's the exact same ingredients except for the C21 Buttermilk Culture. For the Brie, I used a C101 culture. Okay, I'm going to go over the equipment that we're going to need for this Camembert. We're going to need our stock pot like we normally do. We need a heat source. For this cheese, I'm just using 2 gallons of pasteurized whole milk. It'll make perfectly fine cheese. Raw milk is great, but this is cheap and this is what I've decided to use for this cheese. I'm going to need a curd knife. What we're going to need for this cheese is 4 Camembert forms. 2 of these are 4.5 inch inside diameter and the other 2 are 4.25 inside diameter, which is perfectly fine. In addition to those forms, we're going to need some plastic draining mats. The forms and the draining mats you can get via the link in the description of this video. In addition, we're going to need some type of surface to drain these. If you remember, if you watched the Brie cheese making video, we did a series of flips with these. Same forms I used. So it needs to be able to drain well because we're not going to cook this curd. We're not going to dry it out. We're going to cut it very big, not even stir it, but we're just cutting it so we can scoop it out and put it in these smaller forms. But there's no cooking of the curd, so it's going to be very wet. So we're going to have to flip it multiple times, and you need to let it be able to drain very well. So what I have is, I have this tray. It's about a little over an inch high, and it has a grate in it. I got this, I think just off Amazon. You can Google draining trays, something like that. This is going to work great. I will have to dump it once in a while, but that's fine. Now this is nice and sturdy. This grate isn't going to flex, and it'll allow the whey to drain away from it very easily. So we're going to use these 4 forms on this grate with the plastic draining mats. We'll get to all that here shortly. We can start putting in our calcium chloride in our milk now. Okay, I'm going to dump in the calcium chloride. I diluted a 1/4 teaspoon of calcium chloride into about a 1/4 cup of non-chlorinated water. So I'm going to dump that in first, and then I'll dump my 2 gallons of whole milk, pasteurized whole milk, in after, and that'll mix right in real well as I'm pouring this in. We're going to want to bring this milk, once I have it in, to 90 degrees. Once we hit 90 degrees, I'll take it off of the heat source. We'll put our bacteria culture in, and then we'll let it ripen. Or in other words, we'll let it acidify. Now that we have that in, put my thermometer in, I have the heat on, and we'll heat this up to 90 degrees, and then we will continue to the next step. As our milk is heating up, every so often we do want to give it a stir. We don't want it to get real hot on the bottom and stay cold on top. We want it to heat up uniformly. I'm just going to give this a stir. We're not splashing the milk around. We want to be gentle with the milk. I just stir back and forth and kind of up and down if you can, just to make sure it's all mixed in well. I'm still pretty cold. I'm only at about 45 degrees. So we got a little bit. We don't want to just blast this on heat to heat it up to 90. We want to bring it up kind of slow. I'd say probably 15-20 minutes, something like that, to bring it up to 90 degrees. And then at that point, we'll put in our Penicillium Candidum, our Buttermilk Culture, and then also our Geotrichum Candidum. And then we will let that set for about 30 minutes. All right, we've got our milk at 90 degrees. I've taken it off my heat source, and now we can put our cultures in. All right, now I'll start by putting the buttermilk culture in, the C21. Just want to kind of sprinkle it over the top so when it rehydrates well and it doesn't clump up on us. Okay, now we're going to want to put our Penicillium Candidum. That's 1/8 teaspoon level. And the same with this, as we just did with the buttermilk culture. Just want to sprinkle it on top. Now we're going to use 1/32 of a teaspoon, and we're going to put our Geotrichum Candidum in. And likewise with this, we're just sprinkling it on top. We're going to want to give this about 2 minutes to rehydrate, and then we'll stir it in real well. We want to let it rehydrate so it doesn't clump up and it mixes in well. Okay, we put our cultures in and we've let it sit for about 2 minutes to rehydrate. Now what we're going to do is stir it up slowly to mix it in well. And then once we're done this, we're going to want to put our lid on, wrap the pot with something like a towel or something to try to keep it as close as possible to that 90 degrees that we just heated it up to. And when we're stirring this, it's very slow, kind of back and forth. If you're splashing it all, you don't want that. It's a gentle process. So we're going to let this sit now for 30 minutes. And then we're going to come back and we'll add our rennet. It's been 30 minutes now since we put our cultures in. Now what we're going to want to do is add our rennet. So we want to use a 1/4 teaspoon of rennet. I'm using animal rennet, and about a 1/4 cup of non-chlorinated water. This is just to help disperse it better in the milk. Just give that a stir, mix it up, and now I'm just going to pour this into my milk. Try not to splash it too much. Now I'm going to stir this in real well. Slow stirring motions back and forth. And we want to stir this for about a minute. We want to make sure it's thoroughly mixed in. Try to do some up and down motions with your stir, just to make sure that we're not just swirling it, but we're actually mixing it in the whole pot of milk. So when I'm done stirring this has an extended curd setting time. We're going to let this sit for 90 minutes. The reason for this is it's going to help with retaining the moisture within the curds, because as I mentioned earlier, we're not cooking the curd, we're not drying them out at all. We want a very moist curd. So an extended coagulation time will help with that. Now you will notice probably within 18 minutes or 20 minutes that it will start to firm up. We want to let it go the whole 90 minutes. Absolutely critical. So we'll let this go 90 minutes. We'll test for a clean break. If we have a clean break, we'll cut it into about 1-inch chunks, and then we're ready to scoop it into our forms. So I'll see you back here in about 90 minutes. We're back, it's been 90 minutes. Our curd should be formed. What we always want to do before we start cutting and stirring curd, if it's cheese that you're going to cook the curd and stir it, we want to make sure we have a clean break. That means we're checking to make sure that the rennet has coagulated the milk properly to form our curd mass. So let's see if we have a clean break. If we do, I'll cut it about 1-inch strips, vertical or horizontal. And then I'm not going to stir it at all because we don't want to dry the curd out at all for this cheese. The Camembert, you want a very moist curd going into the forms. But let's check out our curd to see if we do get that clean break, and then we'll go from there. Now, to check to see if we have a clean break, what we're going to do is we're going to make a small cut vertical, and then another cut horizontal straight across that, and then we're going to lift up a little bit. So let's make a small cut like that, and a small cut across it, and this is lift up, and you see how that separates? That's a clean break. So we're good. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut this in about 1-inch wide strips. That's bigger than we normally would if we were making a pressed cheese. But for this, as I mentioned a couple times, we don't want to dry it out. And you can see I kind of go on an angle with my curd knife, just because if I don't, I'll have strips, which is fine for this cheese, but it's just kind of a habit. So Okay, then we have our curd cut. You can see how it separates. That is wonderful. Now what we're going to do is we're going to ladle it into our forms. I have everything sanitized, have my forms set up. As I showed you in the beginning of the video, I'm using 2 bamboo and I'm using 2 plastic draining mats because I have 2 more of each as well. So in order to have enough room on this tray, I just mixed it up. So this should work fine. Test this out. But now, after we cut the curds, we can just start ladling our curd right into the forms. Okay, now that the curds are all in the forms, we're gonna let this sit for about 20 minutes, and then we're gonna do our first flip. You don't wanna let it sit long or else you can have problems flipping it. We're gonna flip it while it's still pretty early in the process. So we'll come back in about 15 minutes and we will do our first flip. All right, it's been about 20 minutes. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna do the first flip. Again, you wanna do the first flip in a relatively short amount of time after you put the curd in, just so it drains evenly. The first flip is going to be the hardest. It's still very loose. It's not consolidated on top at all. I can see some whey sitting on top. So if you slip doing this step, it's going to be quite messy. Luckily, I've never done that, but there's a first time for everything. All right, you're going to see I have a couple different pans here. I have the tray I showed you in the beginning, and then I have a cookie sheet and another cookie sheet. The reason I did that is because this pan, because it's collecting, right now it's collecting most of the whey, the initial whey release, it's getting pretty full. So I need to flip this, put it on the cookie sheet for a couple minutes, flip this one, and then flip these 2 onto this one, and I'm going to dump this and then put the flip cheeses back on. It'd be much easier if I had just 2 of these, and then I could just flip it over to that, not touch it again, just dump that one. But I only have 1, so I'm gonna have to do it this way. Everything, again, should be sanitized. Obviously everything's washed, and I use a spray sanitizer called Star San to give everything a shot before I start letting the curd touch it. That way it reduces any kind of bad bacteria that can get in there and do things that we don't want to happen. So let's do the first flip. Now when you do this, you're going to want to put your draining mat or screen on top. You're going to want to make sure you have a firm grasp on this, and then just flip it like that. Okay, we got the first flip done. A little messy, but you will have this sometimes. I'm not too worried about it. The next flip will be easier, and it'll only get easier from there. All right, it's been about another 20 minutes, 15-20 minutes. I'm going to do the second flip, and then after that, we are going to wait about 45 minutes. We have all 4 flipped. Now we're going to come back. I said 45 minutes, but we're going to come back in about 20. There's still a lot of moisture in here. I just want to make sure it doesn't get stuck to any of the draining mats. We'll flip it a couple more times, like every half hour, and then we'll let it go overnight. Okay, everybody, we flipped the camemberts a few times, and then I let it sit overnight to dry. After that, I took the forms off, and I put a 1/4 teaspoon of salt on each of the surfaces. I let that sink in for about 4 hours, flipped it over, and then I did another 1/4 teaspoon on each one of them as well. Now these have been sitting here now for about 2.5 days air drying. It's important before we put these in the aging space at about 52 degrees and 94% humidity. Before we do that, it's important that these are dry. We don't want to just throw them in there wet. It will affect the taste of the cheese, the final product. So these have been sitting a few days and we'll see what we have. Okay. Now I have flipped these several times over the last couple days as they've been air drying, just so they dry evenly. But you can see they're looking really nice. Smell good. All right, we're set. I'm gonna put these in my aging space, and we will start developing the white mold on the outside within a couple days. Once that is fully grown on the entire surface of each wheel, after about a week to 10 days, I'm gonna wrap each one of these and I'm gonna put them in the regular refrigerator. It'll keep the moisture in and it'll slow down the ripening process a little bit evenly throughout. So I'll get these in the aging space and we'll see what these look like here in about a week before I wrap them. Okay, it's been 11 days since the make day. As you remember, I air dried these for a few days after I made them. So they've been in the aging space, the temperature and humidity controlled aging space, for about 7 days. And you can see these cheeses look absolutely beautiful. Beautiful white bloomy rind on all of them. It's almost feels like almost like cotton. It's little feels like fabric. You can see how the edge of this is indenting in. That's actually the cheese ripening inside. So the white mold is creating enzymes that work on the cheese inside. And when I cut this open, in about 4 or 5 weeks, it's going to be gooey, and that's because of the enzymes. But these look really, really nice. So this is 2 gallons of milk, and I got about 4.5 inch wheels out of them. Very pleased with these so far. So now what we have to do is we have to wrap these and then put them in just a regular refrigerator. The reason we're doing that is we want to kind of slow down the ripening of the cheese, but we want to wrap them so it holds in the moisture. So I have some special cheese paper here. It's dull on one side and then kind of shiny on the other. So this will help keep the moisture into the cheese, and this is what we'll finish the aging with. So to wrap this, all we're doing, putting one in the middle, and just kind of folding over the edges like this. Make it look nice and pretty, of course. It's not good. I am not good at wrapping Christmas presents, as you can tell, but I do my best. Now, just put a piece of tape over that, and voila. I'll write on here the date, obviously, that it's our Camembert, and then I'll do this to all 4 of these, and we will be ready for final aging. About 3 to 5 weeks in the regular refrigerator in this wrapping paper, and it's ready to eat. I'll finish wrapping these, get these going, but I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you learned something. If you have any questions at all, please let me know and I will address those. But thanks for watching. Happy cheese making.